What you man saying? This is Nabil, and yeah, we're just going to be discussing about top 5 skills needed to basically make sure that you could get out of a call center. So, mainly when it comes to call centers, there's not much progression. Well, that's not entirely true in the sense it's very hard to essentially do. Therefore, you have basically a much better chance of basically breaking through to another industry such as IT, tech, finance, marketing, etc., etc. So I'm just going to be listing out the skills in which you can use to talk about your interviews in order to make sure that you could be able to have higher chances of essentially making sure that you can get an offer or basically progress to the next stage really. So yeah, let's just get into it. So starting off with number 1, communication skills. So like with all call center jobs, you have many customers calling about many sort of complex queries, many sort of simple queries that can be done or do not even need to be called up at all really. Mainly what I'm talking about mainly relies in relation to upselling, but in terms of that, how you can explain that, that's when your communication skills essentially come in. So your skills will mainly rely on how simply you can condense complex information into more simple information in order to make sure many customers can understand what you're exactly trying to say. And if you can do that, explain from the most complicated terms and queries, then you can be able to, for other higher positions, be able to explain more complex terms and terminologies to many sort of stakeholders, many sort of senior managers, in which you could pick up in terms of how this sort of idea that you want to do can essentially help to benefit the business, and you could be able to clearly communicate that. You can mention many sort of examples in regards to that, mainly like maybe for example a difficult custom in regards to how credit cards work, what are the actual terminologies of the credit card in order to make sure they can be able to utilize the credit card properly and make sure they have no sort of problems in regards to that. Or you could talk about a project maybe you may have done in uni, voluntary work, maybe in terms of like, maybe some sort of problem solving task and abilities that you try to do, maybe through use of analytics. And maybe you could talk about in terms of how you made it explain to your team in terms of what you need to do in order to make sure you can get that task to the highest quality. So yeah, communication skills. Another skill in which you can mention is attention to detail skills. So mainly when it comes to attention to detail skills, you're mainly going to be thinking about like what the customer is talking about to you. So you need to be able to make sure you understand the customer clearly, and that's where attention to detail skills. Sometimes, mainly when it comes to customers, you may repeat yourself, and that may cause the customers to essentially get a bit more angry. So just making sure that you are being very attentive to the details that the customer is saying in order to make sure you can get a really good understanding of the queries is really beneficial in this case. It works a lot with finance, any sort of data analytics role really, because use of numbers, gotta make sure that you are basically attentive to detail, and if you can do that, that basically means in terms of reporting for like data analysis, you're able to be more accurate in a sense. With banking customer service, you basically have a lot more advantages to talk about. And what I mean by that is mainly when it comes to high value payments. So of course, customers would usually call up to essentially do like high value payments, and that could be up to like, well, in my experience, mainly around like 200k to like 10 million. So you could talk about that in terms of how much responsibility you had to take for high value clients in order to do high value payments, in order to make sure that can be done smoothly and quickly as possible. So yeah, because some things that you could also mention is the fact that there's also a quality assurance team in order to make sure the payment and the information that you are basically submitting through in terms of requests is correct. So in regards to that, talk about how you also attended to detail in which you managed to get all the legitimate source of funds in order to make sure that the quality assurance teams doesn't really call you up, and through that way the customer can be able to get what they need to do swiftly and quickly as possible. Another thing you can potentially talk about mainly when it comes to skills in general overall for call centers is basically the problem solving skills. Now, I know that mainly when it comes to problem solving skills, mainly when it comes to like call center agent, and there's not much use of it. I mean, mainly when it comes to it, it's mainly in regards to basically identifying products in order to make sure you can be able to solve the customer's main problem. But if if you're talking about a bit more in depth, like talk about like how it benefits the business, basically for example like lots of procedural changes, that is what you could bullshit about the most. There's lots of potential opportunities to essentially bullshit about like existing procedures when it comes to like in terms of average handling times, making sure the hold times are essentially reduced, and overall just use data analytics for like call listening and making sure you can spot correlations in regards to that. So that's one thing you could really talk about when it comes to problem solving skills. I know that also lies in relation to the fact of analytical skills as well, which is what I was also going to mention. But yes, all of this mainly relies in problem solving skills. What you can talk about is mainly in regards to revamping procedures in order to make sure that customer journeys can be a lot more better. If you're in banking, in which I am in currently, you could basically talk about how you can enhance online services to make sure that you can reduce many people that are calling to you. This is just to make sure for queries that actually need to be solved to really important customers, they could be done over the phone. So, what you could also talk about as one of the other five skills that you could potentially have. This could be for this could basically be for any position, to be honest. But with call centers, if they have like specific products that are very complex to understand, you could talk a lot about fast learning skills. The reason why I mention fast learning skills is mainly due to the fact that mainly when it comes to employers, sometimes they essentially overload you with lots of tasks. And if you're like currently in like on a training scheme or an apprenticeship scheme that you're basically learning on the fly and whilst basically studying for qualification, then you may feel as if the current workload is basically going way above your pace. So you can talk a lot in regards to fast learning skills in terms of how well you can basically adapt to the existing work environment and to how the nature of the business is basically for yourself to be able to work perfectly in. So you can talk a lot about that, and with call centers, you could basically talk about how you essentially manage to be able to understand the entire nature of how the business works. What are the core values you essentially need to achieve in order to make sure you can achieve high pass rates. You can also talk about being proactive in terms of learning about the products in order to make sure you could be better to basically have a better explanation to customers in terms of what the products is about. And if you can showcase lots of proactivity and talk about how you're really motivated in order to make sure you can be able to provide the best sort of services possible in a short amount of time, talk about like how you wanted to go more than further beyond in terms of like learning, mentoring, anything like that. Basically, maybe potentially advising one-to-one assessments to the supervisors in order to make sure you can perfect your skills. And yeah, talk a lot about the fast learning skills. The main character traits that you are going to be talking about is mainly being proactive, talking about like how you want to be able to make sure that you could be able to do the best of your ability, and talk about like how you have like specific learning plans in order to make sure that you can showcase to employers that you are there to progress within an organization. That is also a plus in relation to that. That I would say would be multitasking skills. So, in relation to why I mentioned that, is mainly due to the fact that mainly when it comes to employers at like much more bigger jobs, when it comes to like marketing, IT, you name the organization really, there's lots of tasks that you need to make sure you could be able to get done within a specific deadline. In a call center, it's kind of like that as well. Mainly when it comes to the deadline is basically the call that you are doing, and you're basically making sure that you're meant to be doing that in a specific time frame. So this could be multiple queries that you're mainly juggling around, and mainly when it comes to the task that you're mainly going to be doing, mainly when it comes to the calls that you're going to be helping out upon, there's lots of multitasking in relation to data entry, making sure that customers are filled in terms of hold times, making sure that the current checks when it comes to certain queries, because in certain queries such as high value payments or credit card applications, there's also lots of checks that need to be done in order to make sure that the customer can be able to apply for certain things. So you can talk a lot about how you were in a pressurized situation, mainly due to the amount of tasks that you had to complete for the customer. And there was also specific targets in relation to complicated queries that mainly had multiple deadlines, in order to showcase to employers that you can be able to multitask effectively. Why I mention this is mainly because of the fact that you could be getting multiple tasks that is way above your expected workload when you first get into the specific job that you want to do. This could be maybe a graduate scheme or an apprenticeship scheme. Your initial expectations would mainly be that you would mainly be doing work or task in relation to how you will essentially flow when it comes to the apprenticeship scheme, basically doing the related tasks towards what you're learning in order to make sure you can be able to learn a lot more effectively. But mainly when it comes to the employer's needs, they might need you to do way more than that. So therefore, a lot more tasks. If you're able to replicate that in terms of how well you can be able to benefit employers when it comes to a lot more of the senior task, in terms of like the 1 month deadline, 2 month deadlines when it comes to specific projects, then that can be really useful for yourself to show in order to make sure that you could be able to be more employable to employers that you want to get into. So to summarize, these are essentially your skills that you need to be showcasing to employers. There's a lot more other skills out there, but these are the ones I'm just going to mention to you. So communication skills, in terms of explaining complex terms and queries in order to make sure you could be able to build trust with colleagues and relationships with senior stakeholders. Attention to detail skills, mainly when it comes to data and numerics, you need to make sure that the solutions that you mainly provide mainly line up with the data that you essentially assessed and collected in order to make sure that everything's correct. Attention problem solving skills, so this is essentially making solutions in regards to existing solutions and problems or scenarios in which it could really help to benefit the businesses. You can talk a lot about this through essentially revamping lots of existing procedures. If you're in banking, you could talk about like how you can improve online services in order to make sure you can essentially reduce call times or reduce the amount of calls that you're getting overall. Fourth skill, fast adaptability skills, how well you can take on new information and how that can be able to serve employers in terms of making sure that you can help out in urgent queries in which they may need more manpower. This is essentially to make sure that employers can be able to rely upon you to be able to make sure that you could get the most difficult tasks out of the way if the employers are in dire situations in which they do need new colleagues to basically help out. And finally, multitasking skills, so being able to handle lots of work or related to tasks in a specific amount of time or a specific time frame. That can be through lots of urgent projects, mainly in relation to fast adaptability skills, but this time you're mainly going to be talking about how you essentially juggle the task in order to make sure you're able to keep a clear head, be able to think logically, whilst being able to make sure you can be able to handle high pressure environments. And that is through essentially making sure that you can be able to multitask effectively, know which priorities should have more of a priority than others. So yeah, that's basically the skills that I'm mentioning just for call center agents to essentially utilize and showcase off in interviews in order to make sure they can be able to go into other fields in which there's more progression opportunities. The reason why I'm mentioning all of this in the video, or why I even made this video in the first place, is because of the fact that I finally got an apprentice finance assistant position. So if you want, I can talk about my journey in terms of how I managed to get an apprenticeship position in first place, because some people may feel like the uni route may not be so effective for them, and that I can completely understand. Me and myself being a uni dropout, I can completely understand as to why. So yeah, if you guys want me to make a video in terms of how I even managed to get that apprenticeship position in the first place, it took me quite a while. Yeah, I'll be more than happy to do a video. It's an apprentice finance position, by the way. So anyone interested in finance or essentially interview skills overall in terms of how to essentially be able to get a better chances of increasing job offers, then I can be more than happy to make a video upon that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That pretty much sums up the entire video, why I made it, what are the skills needed, and yeah, that's it. So if you guys like this video, please do leave a like, leave a comment in terms of what I can essentially improve, and yeah, take care and have a great day.